Hey everyone, this is Mike with the One Stop Co-op Shop, and I'm continuing my review series of the Arkham Horror, the card game campaign expansions. I finished playing the Drowned City and didn't love it, but I had some free time, so I jumped right into one that I bought years ago but never played, Edge of the Earth. This was the first campaign that got the separate campaign box treatment, which let them do the campaign structure quite a bit differently. But let's jump right in and do my normal thing. I'm going to talk about the investigators in the expansion, then the campaign structure and mechanics, the narrative and story, and finally the individual scenarios with minimal to no spoilers. So first of all, looking at the 5 investigators, they all have something interesting in common in that they're not as much the class they seem to be. For example, Daniela, who is a guardian, can only get level 0 guardian cards, and then for all the rest of her leveling up, she has to get survivor cards. And Lily's the same way. She seems to be a mystic, but she actually gets guardian cards. You get the idea. They all start with one class, but very quickly transition into another. So let's talk about the individuals. Daniela's a super tough guardian, 5 strength, although again, not that much of a guardian. And her big thing is that she actually likes to get attacked because when she is, she can either deal free damage or evade automatically. Now, her main class for leveling up is survivor, which theoretically will help her be more survivable and give her more ways to tank damage and such. So pretty cool character. Next, Norman Withers is, if you're familiar with Lord of the Rings, the Gandalf of this set. A character, and they have one of these in each of their LCGs where they can look at the top card of their deck and play it at a discount. Besides that, his stats really make him pretty much what he seems to be, a seeker who's also a mystic, because all of his level ups will have to be in mystic arts. Next is Monterey Jack, basically Indiana Jones. He gets a bonus for moving away from his starting location each round. He gets a free card draw or resource production. And even though he's a rogue, he goes into the seeker class, which fits his 4 intelligence, so he can evade and clue find with the best of them. Bob Jenkins, the survivor/rogue, is an interesting one. He's got solid intelligence, decent stats otherwise. And he's really most interesting in multiplayer games, all about playing items. He gets free actions to play items for himself or other investigators. And he can even play items under the control of characters that usually could not use those items, which opens up just a ton of odd synergies if you want to explore them. And then finally, one of my favorite characters in the game entirely is Lily Chen. She seems to be a mystic, but is really a guardian. And she starts with one of these discipline cards that permanently boost her stats, and she gets another one every time that she reaches a 15 XP threshold. So she just gets like cooler and cooler, and these give her little special powers she can use, and then she has to do something or not do something on her turn to flip them back over. Really, really fun character. I just love her. All right, now getting to the campaign mechanics, there's a few unique things going on here. First, there's this Tekeli Lee deck that's shuffled in each scenario, and a ton of effects will make you shuffle these cards into your player's deck, and then when they get drawn, they have some usually minor effect, like take 1 damage, take 1 horror, and then the cards removed from your deck and put on the bottom of the deck. But importantly, if you haven't drawn them, they just hang out in your deck from scenario to scenario. They're not easy to get rid of automatically, kind of waiting to ping you with their negative effects. And then in kind of a similar vein, you've got these frost tokens that many effects will add to the chaos bag. And when you draw one of these, it counts as a -1 penalty, and then you draw another token, so they're a little bit like the blessings and curses from other sets. But importantly, if you ever draw 2 in the same check, then you automatically fail it. Now, both of these are things you can manage. There are effects and special abilities you can use to remove them from the bag or remove them from your deck. And except in extreme circumstances, they don't feel like they're really ruining your play or totally destroying your chances. So I like these fine. They're like little negative things that you're trying to manage as the campaign goes along, but they don't tend to ruin everything with their negativity. Another major part of the expansion is your expedition team. So this is one of those campaigns that focuses a lot on other characters. You've got 9 to start, and some events in the campaign will kill them if you aren't careful. And then additionally, each player can optionally bring one for each scenario, and they're very helpful. But any damage or horror they incur sticks with them as you go further into the campaign. And if they die, then again, they're dead for the entire campaign, which has its own ramifications in the game. And there's even some opportunities to level them up. So I think it's just a very cool mechanic, a very cool choice. And you'll have different people die because a lot of it is randomized each time you play. So you're going to have kind of different options available to you. Great mechanic overall. And then finally, the campaign structure itself is very unique. Like I said, Edge of the Earth was the first time they did this like separate purchasable full campaign box, unlike the individual releases they used to have. So they were really able to play with the structure of the campaign for the first time. And how that plays out is there are kind of only 5 scenarios instead of the usual 8, because Ice and Death has 3 parts and only one of those is required. Fatal Mirage you can play up to 3 different times, and 0 of those are required. And Heart of Madness has 2 sections, and only one of those is required. So the campaign can can be as short as, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 8 scenarios, or it could go all the way to 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 scenarios if you play the max of everything that's available to you. Now, there isn't a ton of variety within the scenarios. City of the Elder Things probably has the most in kind of the structure of how the scenario is set out. So you're not necessarily getting tons of variety in the scenarios themselves, but still the fact that you have some choices of how to approach the campaign is pretty cool. Now, as for the narrative, I thought this one was actually very good. One of the stronger ones I've played recently. And that's really all about these side characters, because you get many instances where you can talk to them. In one of the scenarios, you can even kind of dig into their past and find out some of the demons that are torturing them. And many of them have little relationships that you can cultivate and they can help them out at some moments. But then, of course, you're losing them, which can be pretty terrible. Now, the actual narrative of the campaign itself is pretty much just a straight sequel to At the Mountains of Madness, one of Lovecraft's main stories, kind of like Dunwich Legacy was a direct sequel to the Dunwich Horror. And it's fine, there's some cool stuff going on, but mostly you're just going into a city and weird stuff happens and most of it doesn't make too much sense. So yes, really, for me at least, it's all about the characters, and this is what made the narrative so engaging and enjoyable for this one. Now, getting to the scenarios with minimal spoilers. So Ice and Death, like I said, is a 3-parter, although you only have to play the first part. And what's interesting is that you use the same map setup, and the better you do with the map in your initial plays, the less you have to explore in the later plays. And also you're using mostly the same encounter deck, just adding or removing some sets. So if you want to sit down and play several in a row, the game makes it pretty easy to do that. Cold Welcome, the first one, is really cool the first time you play it, but I think it kind of becomes less interesting the more often you play it, because nothing much changes and you have the exact same goal each time, so you kind of know what to do. A Harsh Wind Blows is super interesting in that a ton of it is randomized, and narratively and thematically it's also really cool as you try to sort of rescue people and find them in the ice. And then Manifestations of Evil is a straight-up tower defense fighting scenario, and it's pretty neat too. Although in future plays, again, you could skip one or both of these if you're not feeling like playing them. Next, the required scenario is To the Forbidden Peaks. This one's pretty quick, but I still found it interesting in that you're basically climbing over a mountain and you're lugging this equipment with you, and trying to manage the equipment can give you really good benefits later on in the campaign. Now, the frustrating thing with this one is that there are many cars that just make you fall off the mountain, basically, and really slow you down, so you can feel like you're going 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. But I think the mix of survival and trying to bring equipment with you makes this pretty interesting. City of the Elder Things, as I already mentioned, has the most variety in terms of the setup of the scenario and changes up some things you're trying to do. And it uses extra chaos tokens in a really interesting way to give you potentially a bunch of benefits that you can decide how much you want to dig for or not. This is also maybe the largest map I've ever seen in a scenario of Arkham Horror, but they give you lots of ways to kind of fast track your movement and teleport around and stuff. So yeah, I think it's a fun, interesting scenario overall. Fatal Mirage, I won't go into too much, but this is one that really delves into the psychologies of your companions. It is entirely optional, but you can play it up to 3 times based on choices in the campaign. And this one can get a little bit samey. I certainly wouldn't want to play it 3 times, because even within the scenario, you're kind of doing the same sort of thing over and over. But thematically and narratively, it's the most interesting scenario I've seen in this entire campaign set, and one of the more interesting overall in Arkham Horror. So I enjoyed it from that aspect quite a bit. And finally, The Heart of Madness is another 2-parter, the first part being entirely optional. I thought the first part was pretty cool. You're trying to collect a bunch of things, and you can kind of decide how much you want to push the risk and how many you want to get, and it will simplify things in the second scenario. Now, the endings of Arkham campaigns are always hit or miss for me, and this one I would say is a bit more miss in the final scenario. It's a cool scenario, it is pretty tense, but then the very, very end of it is just kind of like, yep, some things happen, like, I won't go into too many spoilers, but there's not like anything climactic that really makes it as exciting as I would like. So it ends for me on a bit of a down note, but it's still a good kind of ending scenario overall besides that. So overall, I had a blast with The Edge of the Earth, my first time playing it. Definitely one of my recent favorites. I wouldn't necessarily put it as high as Hemlock Vale, but it's way, 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 way higher than The Drowned City and The Scarlet Keys, 2 of the other recent ones I've played some of. The focus on characters is always what I really enjoy in Arkham Horror, although for people who want to read less, this might annoy them. And the new mechanics don't really get in the way too much. Those extra cards, the frost tokens. The scenarios are not the most replayable in the world, and the fact that you can skip them is maybe not an exciting thing because you want to play Arkham Horror theoretically, but still I appreciate that they tried out something different and weird for this first separate campaign box. Alright, thanks for watching everybody, and a special thank you to our biggest Patreon supporters, J. William F., Pedro Lucas, Nick Skeen, Miles, Wayne Scott, and Steve Wren. We'll see you at the next stop.